Kia ora koutou, and welcome to this webinar introducing the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021. I'm Dwayne Wilkins, Geospatial Advisor here at Land and Toitū Te Whenua, Land Information New Zealand, and I'll be just helping out facilitating today. And I'm joined by Anselm Lyndon, the Surveyor General, and Lyndon Telfer, Assistant Surveyor General. So I hand it over to you, Anselm and Lyndon, to take it away.
Ka pai Dwayne, and kia ora, kaururi whānau. A warm welcome everyone to this webinar introducing the new Cadastral Survey Rules. I'm really delighted to be finally launching the new Cadastral Survey Rules after 3 rounds of consultation and an enormous amount of work that's been going on in the background. I'm particularly grateful for the feedback that we've received from surveyors, which I hope has shaped these rules so that they're both effective in achieving their purposes and also usable by surveyors and their staff. So while the immediate focus may be on the rules themselves, we've been going to quite an effort to make the implementation palatable for surveyors. We've developed transition arrangements that are intended to avoid the problems associated with a big bang introduction. And we're providing guidelines that are not only about the new rules and the changes, but guidance about cadastral survey matters more generally. So, what are we going to cover? I'll be explaining the transition arrangements, and then Lyndon will take over to go through the rules changes affecting fieldwork. We're planning on running another set of webinars before the rules come into effect at the end of August. They'll be more about the cadastral survey data set and land online changes that will be relevant once the new rules come into effect. Our intention here is not to provide all the detail of the changes, but to tell you about the significant changes so that you can understand them and where to look. You'll still need to do your homework and read the rules, particularly when you're looking to apply them. Lyndon will then talk about how to get more information, and particularly the new guidelines that we will continue to develop over the rest of the year. So the transition arrangements. As you know, we've already published the rules. They are now available on the legislation website. We're sort of using the abbreviation CSR 2021 for the rules. We won't be providing hard copies as we've done in previous years. You'll need to download and print them off if you want to work off a hard copy. Some people still prefer to do that, and sometimes it's handy to have the digital version to sort of search through. The commencement or go live date is Monday 30th of August, and that coincides with the changes that we've made to Land Online to support the new rules. Land Online won't be able to support capture of CSDs in terms of these new rules until that release. However, given the long period of time between receiving a survey instruction from your clients and lodgement, you should consider using the 2021 rules when undertaking new fieldwork so that you can lodge those CSDs in terms of the new rules in due course. So, unlike previous rules, there's going to be transition arrangements for surveyors commenced under the rules, the current rules, the 2010 rules, but not yet lodged. We're not going cold turkey. Surveys commenced under the current, commenced prior to the new rules coming into force can continue to be completed in accordance with the 2010 rules until the 25th of February next year. And after that date, CSDs will only be able to be lodged and certified in terms of the 2021 rules. So during that transition period, CSDs will be able to be certified and lodged in terms of either set of rules. Where a CSD is certified in terms of the 2010 rules and is requisitioned, it may be recertified under the 2010 rules, but it has to happen before that 25th of February date. So in other words, all certifications after the 25th of February, even following requisition, will have to be in terms of the new rules. So when a requisition involves a change in capture, for instance, you'll need to convert a survey to be in accordance with the 2021 rules after that date. So for this reason, it's recommended that you lodge CSDs in terms of the rules, the 2010 rules, by the end of January So if it does get requisitioned, you can then relodge it before the 25th of February. Now, at this stage, I don't know how that's going to pan out for surveyors and how many CSTs you'll have done in terms of the current rules or the new rules. And as we get closer to the date, we'll see how that pans out. Okay. So now we're going to move over to the hand over to Lyndon. He's going to talk about the detailed changes on the rules as they impact on surveyors.
Right, thanks, Anselm. I just wonder if I should just do a quick check-in with Dwayne just to check that everything's going well, everyone can hear us clearly. And
yep, going good, guys. Everything's kapai.
Fantastic, thanks.
Going great.
Okay, look, just to set an expectation here for this part of the presentation, I'm going to be talking for about 30 minutes. So while I'm presenting, please keep sending through your questions, and we'll in the chat, and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. So the first thing I want to talk about is horizontal datum connection. We signaled really early in the development of the rules that there's going to be a mandatory requirement to connect to a cadastral survey network mark. The requirement's really straightforward. You have to connect to a cadastral survey network mark within 1,000 metres if there is one. However, if there is not one within 1,000 metres, then any cadastral survey network mark can be connected to at any distance. There's no longer different distance requirements for different classes of boundary, and the connection can be by adoption or measurement. If there's no nearby cadastral survey network marks that you can easily connect to, LINZ has developed a process using the Positions NZ PP service to generate 6 order cadastral marks. These marks can be added to Land Online in advance of a CSD being submitted. To make that happen, you need to take some measurements. You need 2 independent GNSS occupations of at least an hour in duration. You then need to upload the data to the Positions NZ PP service, and then send an email to LINZ requesting that the mark is added to Land Online. Now, this process is explained in detail on the LINZ website. If you do a search on Position NZ-PP on our website, it will be the top search result that you find. So reference marks. So witness marks are no longer referred to and have been replaced by a stronger requirement for 3 permanent reference marks. PRMs are expected to be placed to remain usable and not disturbed in the foreseeable future. The 50-year term is no longer explicitly stated, but marks must be placed on the basis that they are permanent. Each boundary point that's required to be referenced must have a PRM within the specified distance. And of course, that's 150 metres for Class A, 500 metres for Class B, and 1,000 metres for Class C. Each of those 3 PRMs required must be within the applicable distance of a boundary point that is required to be referenced. So on the next slide is an example of how this rule applies. The rules also clarify the mark description information required to be populated in Land Online, rather than recorded on finder diagrams. So when you place a PRM, you need to make sure you record details such as general description in relationship to ground. Some examples might include iron tube in berm 0.3 metres down, or under cast iron cover in carriageway. So now onto the example of the requirements for permanent reference marks. What we've got here is a simple 2-lot rural subdivision. So the 3 new boundary positions that's on the periphery of lot 1 are illustrated by the solid green circles, and they must be defined by survey, and each requires a PRM within 500 metres. So in a smaller rural subdivision, it may be possible that each new boundary position is within 500 metres of a single PRM. If that's the case, 2 additional PRMs are still required, each within 500 metres of any of these boundary points. So in the example we've got on the screen, there's actually a 4th PRM required because there's an old boundary mark being located in the southeastern corner of lot 2. So that also needs to have a PRM within 500 metres. So now into height limited parcels. In the rules, we replaced the term stratum with height limited. And the appellations for parcels limited in height will also be required to have a height limited prefix. So for example, you'll have height limited lot 1, or height limited area A, or height limited section 1. So the key changes you need to be aware of when defining a height limited boundary is that all reduced levels must be in terms of an official vertical datum. You can no longer use alternative or assumed datums unless it's a subsequent stage of a unit title development and those datums have already been used. The official vertical datums are listed in Schedule 5 of the rules, and for clarity, they include New Zealand Vertical Datum 2016 and the 13 local vertical datums. And also just to note that in the future, we are looking to require all levels to be in terms of New Zealand Vertical Datum 2016. So where a survey includes a height limited boundary point, a vertical control mark must be included in the survey, regardless of how close the vertical control mark is to the site. And the vertical control mark requirements are exactly the same as what they are for a cadastral survey network mark. So if a vertical control mark is within 1,000 metres, it must be included in the survey. However, if there's not a vertical control mark within 1,000 metres, then any vertical control mark can be included. So a height limited boundary point on a primary or unit parcel must also include at least 3 PRMs, with 2 of those having reduced levels. However, if you've got a height limited boundary point on an easement, covenant or lease, you no longer need reference marks with reduced levels, although a vertical control mark must be included in the survey. So while you need to include that vertical control mark for easements, covenants and leases, it might not need horizontal connections to be captured. So compliance can be achieved by adding the annotation on the title diagram, like I've put there on the slides. It would be like something along the lines of levels are in terms of the datum, in this case NZVD 2016. You then need to have the mark name, brass plaque 1 and the SO reference. I've also included in this example the GEDIT code, that's helpful information. And also you'll also need to include the RL. So accuracy standards. Accuracy standards are now specified as a single tier, although the requirements are not too dissimilar from the 2010 rules. But the key changes you need to be aware of are there's a new vertical accuracy standard between a vertical control mark and a height limited boundary point. And that applies to ensure an accurate relationship and provides for future re-establishment of that boundary. Other changes are the vertical accuracy standards now apply to the slope distance between survey marks, and all non-boundary accuracy standards are capped at 0.2 metres rather than the current 0.5. And this is really quite relevant for connection to both cadastral survey network marks and vertical control marks at greater distances. A tighter horizontal tolerance applies between a Class A boundary point required to be referenced and all old and new non-boundary marks within the applicable referencing distance. So this new tolerance is 0.03 metres. And it's exactly the same as what you used under the Surveyor General's rules back in 2002. Horizontal accuracy standards will continue to be tested by the Land Online internal consistency and network adjustments. In the vertical, the accuracy won't be tested by Land Online, and you'll continue to provide reduced levels as user added text. The key message we want to get across today in regard to accuracy standards is that they should not require a change in the way that you undertake surveys, even though we've changed how we specify those accuracy requirements. Now into occupation. There's a couple of small changes related to occupation that you need to be aware of when you're in the field. And the first is occupation information for all new boundary points is now required. Under the current rules, you don't need occupation information for all new boundary points. You only need it where they intersect or coincide with an existing primary parcel boundary. Now, where there's no occupation, you also need to include a no occupation annotation. Again, and you need to record that against the boundary points and related lines on your occupation diagram. So it's really important when you're in the field that you do actually make a positive note in your field notes that there is no occupation, so you can prepare that occupation diagram accurately when you get back from the field. So boundary marking. There's quite a few key changes related to boundary marking that you need to be aware of. And a bit of a principle here, wherever there's a significant uncertainty on the location of an existing boundary point, the rules require that boundary point to be marked. But one of the key changes you need to take note of is when you're removing limitations, all boundary points must now be ground marked. Now, that's a really important requirement. It supports the legal process and ensures adjoining owners can confidently locate the boundary when the Registrar General of Land sends notice under Section 173 of the Land Transfer Act. Now, there is a current alternative process described in guidance which allows these boundary points to be adopted, providing you supply the adjoining owner's consent at time of lodgement. Now, that process will be revoked from the 30th of August this year. So the following boundary points have been clarified as requiring ground marking. You need to ground mark all new points on a Maori land CSD. Now, previously there was an exemption in the rules that didn't require those points to be ground marked. It's been flipped around under the current rules, and there's an expectation that those marks are placed. An existing boundary point only defined on a diagram on transfer also needs to be ground marked. Likewise, if you've got an unmarked non-primary parcel boundary and you're upgrading it or converting it to a primary parcel boundary, those need to be ground marked. And all primary parcel boundaries affected by ground movement also need to be marked. Now, I'm going to talk more about ground movement later. Another change as well is Rule 37 now allows disturbed boundary marks to be removed or driven below the ground. Now, where you do remove that mark, it's really important you record the location of the disturbed mark before you remove it, and you record that position in the record of survey and the survey diagram, along with an annotation to indicate it's been removed. You'll also notice that the rules now specify which boundary points are required to be marked, rather than specifying in detail which points have to be defined by survey. So where a boundary point is required to be marked, but not actually able to be marked, it must still be defined by survey. Okay, non-primary parcels are one area of the rules we've made a significant change in. For a start, we've added a specific section dealing expressly with non-primary parcels. And one key change you need to be aware of is the options for defining non-primary parcels where the underlying parcel is not being created. For example, easement-only surveys or covenant surveys. So traditionally, the non-primary parcel has been defined in terms of the underlying primary parcel. And in most cases, that will be the most efficient way to define them. So what do I mean there? That's simply that you position the non-primary parcel in relation to the primary parcel using non-boundary vectors in your CSD. However, where the underlying parcel is not well defined, or class B or C would otherwise apply, you can define the non-primary parcel in terms of the control network. So in these circumstances, the rules allow the relationship of a non-primary parcel to the underlying parcel to be inaccurately determined. So on the next slide, there's an example of how these requirements are applied. Now, I haven't gone into depth at all about the non-primary parcel requirements because there's some neat innovations in the rules, and I want to draw your attention to the decision tree we now have in Rule 55, which helps you clarify the rules that apply to non-primary parcels. And we've also produced comprehensive guidance that's now available on our website. And later on, I'll explain how to get to that guidance. So the application of inaccurately determined. So if you choose to inaccurately determine the relationship of a non-primary parcel to the underlying parcel, you need to include a connection to at least 2 nearby cadastral survey network marks and 3 PRMs for Class B non-primary parcels. And this is to allow those boundaries to be confidently relocated in the future. Now, for lower accuracy Class C non-primary parcels, you only need to have the 2 cadastral survey network marks, and you don't need PRMs. And even easier for you is the cadastral survey network marks can be adopted. So where the non-primary parcel intersects or coincides with the underlying parcel, the associated vectors are Class D, and that's indicated by the blue line work on that diagram there at the eastern and western ends of Area C. So a bit of a principle here, where the vectors are Class D, the bearings are actually defined to a higher accuracy, and they will be held fixed by future surveyors. So it's the distance that will be recalculated when the relationship is accurately determined to the primary parcel in the future. The control network holds the main body of the non-primary parcel fixed, and the vectors at the end, the bearings are held and the distances are recalculated.
Lyndon, just letting you know your sound is good and pace is good and everything we can hear and see just fine. So carry on, mate.
Appreciate that, thank you. Fantastic. Okay, right, on to ground movement. But we've created a new definition of affected boundary that applies throughout New Zealand. And I just want to read out what the definition is. An affected boundary is a boundary where ground movement has distorted the land in excess of the relevant accuracy tolerances. Also important to note is ground movement covers not just Canterbury earthquake movement, but fault zone movement, slips, and any other form of movement. So when you're working in known areas of ground movement, and you have a primary parcel boundary that's affected, i.e. it's moved by more than survey tolerances, it must be defined by survey and ground marked. We've made this change as there's uncertainty as to the correct location of the boundary that can only be resolved through a full survey. Also in the ground movement section of the rules, there's provisions for dealing with non-primary parcels that have been affected by ground movement. The term deep-seated movement has been replaced with fault zone movement, as it's much more readily identified by changes on the ground. And finally, for those of you working in Greater Christchurch, the same provisions continue to apply. Right, boundary reinstatements. This is another area where we've made significant changes to the rules to clarify the requirements. For instance, the rules now specify where you can't carry out a boundary reinstatement. You can't carry out a boundary reinstatement on a water boundary, a water centreline boundary, or an irregular boundary. You cannot reinstate the boundary of land held in a title limited as the parcels. And you also can't reinstate the boundary of a Māori land CSD, where it has the annotation computed plan areas and boundaries not defined by survey. And these were the CSDs that were produced as part of the Māori Freehold Land Registration Project a good 10 years ago. And their definition just simply doesn't support a full title. There's 2 types of boundary reinstatement CSDs that are going to be added to Land Online from the 30th of August this year. They're called simple boundary reinstatement and complex boundary reinstatement. So complex boundary reinstatement CSDs must be used where there's significant doubt about the true location of the boundary. So examples include where you're subject to conflict, where the boundary is affected, or where the boundary is insufficiently defined on an approved CSD. And finally, if the boundary is defined on a diagram on transfer. So from a survey perspective, a complex boundary reinstatement survey, the requirements are exactly the same as what they are for a full land transfer survey, but without the title plan. Okay. The reduced requirements for a simple boundary reinstatement survey are designed to enable increased efficiency for surveyors both in the field and office. Now, if you do want to use these new rules, you won't need to place any reference marks in the field. There's a very simplified survey report. We have a new template for that. Only 3 things are required in that survey report. You need to tell us about your orientation, any bearing corrections, and your definition methodology. That's all that's needed in that survey report. We need a really simple survey diagram. Well, it's a simplified survey diagram. It's called a reinstatement diagram in the rules. And that can be produced using third-party software. But most importantly, full capture of all the data is still required in Land Online. Because you can't undertake any capture for the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021 and Land Online until the 30th of August, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the reduced office requirements until that date. You might, however, want to think about how you'll record the reinstatement, noting that the CSD must be lodged within 6 months of the placement of a boundary mark. Now again, as with non-primary parcels, I haven't gone into the full depth of the requirements because in the rules, again, there's a decision tree. It's Rule 114, subclause 5. That decision tree will help clarify the rules. And there's also, again, there's comprehensive guidance to support these new requirements. So one of the key changes we made to the rules, which was based on feedback from the profession, was to require field information to be included in the CSD. And such information is the primary evidence of measurements actually made on the ground. We're not specifying the format of that information other than it needs to be in a form that ensures permanent usability. And the main criteria is that information can be readily interpreted by a future surveyor who doesn't necessarily have a full understanding of the equipment used. Now, we're aware that Trimble and Leica have developed outputs from their instrumentation, and that can be attached directly to Land Online in either PDF or TIFF format. To allow future surveyors to accurately plot the position and determine whether there's been any movement of a water boundary, a CSD must also include an accurate record of the position of a water boundary. Again, we don't specify the format of that information, but simply it must be in a form that allows future surveyors to interpret and understand that information. So we'll be adding a new supporting document type to Land Online. It's called Field Information, and to reflect these new requirements. Now, just a note here, the Survey and Spatial Cadastral stream are well prepared for this change, and they're going to be holding a seminar on presentation of field notes, and the event's to be held in Christchurch on the 25th of June, and it's going to be live streamed to members in other locations. So it's going to focus on the electronic field information. Tony Nicol from LINS, I think Bruce Robinson from Leica are also going to be some of the presenters there. So watch out for emails from Survey and Spatial New Zealand on that particular piece of training. So now on to guidance. Look, we've put a lot of effort into developing centralized guidance material that's going to enable you to meet the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021 requirements, as well as Land Online and the legal requirements. So unlike the previous guidance, where the information on a single topic may have been located in 3 different articles written by 3 different authors, we've created a one-stop shop of information on key topics. And we're going to refer to it as the Cadastral Survey Guidelines, and I'm sure many of you will be familiar with that name. We're continuing to develop this new guidance and have initially released 11 topics via a new index page. And I'm going to show you how to access this information in the next slide. The existing guidance will continue to be available from our knowledge base until at least the end of the transition period on the 25th of February next year. So look, the main way to access the Cadastral Survey guidelines is via we've got a new rules implementation webpage. And the easiest way to access this page is by, I'll take you through to the LINS website and I'll talk you through how to get to the information, relevant information. Now, I just want to check, it is displaying, fantastic.
You're all good, mate. Carry on.
Excellent. Okay, so we're on the main LINS website there, and I'm just gonna, the main way to find out the page that you need is to just type rules implementation into the main search engine and hit search there. Now, it's the top result you get when you search rules implementation. Now, this new page that we've created is where all information related to the implementation of the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021 is going to be located. I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking you through what's on here because we encourage you to go here in the first instance. There's a link to the rules themselves on the legislation website, which I'm sure you've all found. There's information on the training, in this case here, the introductory webinars. So any future training that we have or any webinars that we have, there will be information will be included in that particular section there. We've got some more information relating to the transitional arrangements that Anselm's already talked about here today. There is a particular document that I want to draw your attention to, and it's called Transitioning from the Rules of Cadastral Survey 2010 to the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021. And I'm just going to really quickly open that document up. It's a 23-page document. It supplements the information that Anselm's given today and that I've given today. So it covers off changes in the field, it covers off changes in the office, and it also covers off if you're going to convert an existing CSD from RCS 2010 to CSR 2021. So I encourage you to bookmark that or print off a copy and have a read of that.
Yeah, one of the aims with that document was if you're already familiar with the 2010 rules, this will help you understand what the differences are. So it doesn't cover everything in the 2021 rules as if you're starting from scratch. So it's quite a useful document based on that.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm going to pop back to the rules implementation page, and I'm just going to carry on down. The next piece of information there is Cadastral Survey Guidelines, and I'm just going to click through and just illustrate a little bit of some of the information that's in here and talk about the topics. So we have an index page, and we've listed those topics out here. I'm just going to quickly go through them to give you a flavour for what's there at the moment, and we'll continue to add to these topics between now and the go live. So we've got a section on quality of boundary definition. We've got non-primary parcels, permanent structure boundaries. We've brought together a whole lot of information into a super article on content of a CSD survey reporting and CSD certification. Previously, that was in multiple different articles. We've got some fabulous new content we've developed relating to legalisation CSDs. There's a section on boundary reinstatement CSDs, unit plans, and finally some other new content that's been recently developed as well relating to application CSDs, adverse possession, diagram on transfer. And there's a very small section relating to limited titles at the end that will be added to prior to go live as well. So I just want to click through on actually, I'll take a step back. One of the reasons why we have an index page like this, where we have the main topic in bold and then we have the table of contents below it, is it allows you to do a keyword search using the Control F functionality. So you're all familiar with that. You can type a word in there if you wanted to find out if there was any references to limited titles, you'd just type in limited and you'd locate what you're looking for. I just want to quickly click through to non-primary parcels and just explain a couple of key functions and information on this page here. The first thing is you'll notice there's a banner at the top of the page there. It's a yellow banner at the moment, and it says this is a Cadastral Survey guideline relating to the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021. So that's what you're looking for when you're searching for information on the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021. You might want to make sure you get that new banner. Now, that banner is yellow today, and the next couple of days it's going to turn blue. So anything relating to the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021 will be in blue, and anything relating to the Rules for Cadastral Survey 2010 will be in yellow. So just keep an eye out for that to make sure you're in the right space. we have a table of contents there, and you can click through and it will take you down to the relevant information. Now, just at the side of the, just a couple of little pieces of functionality out the side, you can click on the index there and it will take you back to the index where we were. You can click on the CSR 2021 and it will take you through to the rules themselves. And for those of you that are familiar with the knowledge base, even though I encourage you to use the index page to locate guidance relating to the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021, you can still use the knowledge base. But if you do use the knowledge base for searching, you need to make sure you use the you set the filter to Cadastral Survey Guidelines 2021. So now back to the presentation, and this is my last slide. So make sure you have those questions ready and waiting for us.
There's already a bunch there, Lyndon.
There's a bunch there. You've got the answers sorted, Anselm. Right. Today's training has been to prepare you for the changes to the rules that impact fieldwork. And as Anselm mentioned, we're going to be holding a second round of training in August to cover off office and land online changes. And look, the dates are still to be confirmed, but it's most likely going to be 2 weeks prior to the go live, sort of mid-August. And it's also, you need to note that you still can't carry out any capture of Cadastral Survey Rules 2021 CSDs and land online until this date. So that we're also going to be available at the Survey and Spatial Conference in Auckland on the 4th and 5th of August. We've got a 1-hour speaking slot there. We will cover off some content about the rules. We're also going to, I understand, have a stand there. So we encourage you to come and talk to us and ask if you've got any questions on the rules. We're going to be at the Institute of Cadastral Surveying workshop in Dunedin on the 28th of August. But fundamentally, I just want to reiterate, your first port of call for all support material on the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021 is going to be the implementation webpage that I took you to just before. And this page includes links to the new guidance and further information on the transition arrangements. It's also going to have information on Land Online as it becomes available. So we've put a significant amount of time and resources into the development of this material and are confident you'll find it useful. But in the interim, if you can't find the information related to the Cadastral Survey Rules 2021 and the support material, we encourage you to contact us using the email address we've got there on the screen. And that's sgrulesreview@lins.govt.nz. Now that's the same email address we've been using for the whole project, and it's the same email you'll get all communications from the Surveyor General when announcements are made.